Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. I'm DarkCaseX. A missing person case tore away a mask of false kindness, revealing the ugliest side of human nature. 7 bodies were allegedly buried beneath a beautiful garden. As the truth gradually came to light, the killer's identity was shocking. It truly shows you can know a person's face, but not their heart. A charitable facade on the surface, but plotting robbery and murder in the shadows. So what exactly happened back then? Let's travel back 34 years and review the detail of the case together. Sacramento, located in Central California, USA. In 1848, the discovery of high-purity gold attracted a large influx of gold prospectors. Driven by the gold rush, the small town developed rapidly. In the 2020 census, the city's population was about 523,000. Making it the 6th largest city in California. On November 7, 1988, a social worker in Sacramento, Judy Moyes, filed a report that one of her clients was missing. The missing person was named Bert Montoya, 51 years old, formerly a homeless man. Due to mental health issues, he couldn't clearly state his identity, so he had been living in a shelter. After much effort, Judy managed to find his real identity and helped him apply for Social Security benefits. In February, Judy found him a reputable boarding house. It was located at 1426 S Street, Sacramento. It was a 2-story white Victorian building with a large garden next to it. The landlady left the entire first floor vacant, renting it at an extremely low price to elderly people in need, such as alcoholics, people with mental illness, and homeless individuals, among others. The landlady lived in the rooms on the 2nd floor. The landlady did her best to solve problems for the tenants, providing whatever help she could. Not only was she not picky about tenants, she also frequently donated money and goods to charities. It was clear the landlady was a kind-hearted person, beautiful inside and out. Therefore, many social workers were willing to place their clients in her home. Since moving in here, Bert's life gradually became self-sufficient, and his mental state improved a lot. He could engage in simple conversations. Judy would also visit him regularly. But just a few weeks ago, the landlady said Bert had gone on a long vacation and would be back in a few days. Judy didn't suspect anything at the time. Sometime later, when she was preparing to visit again, she received a voicemail. A man claiming to be Bert's brother-in-law said Bert was staying at their house and not to worry. But the meticulous Judy noticed that the name of the person who left the message was different from Bert's actual brother-in-law's name. She went to the landlady to ask about the situation. The landlady said Bert went to Mexico to visit relatives. This explanation made Judy even more worried. Bert had been in the US for many years and had long lost contact with his relatives. Moreover, he now had mental health issues. Added to that, the landlady was stammering as if she was deliberately hiding something. So she believed something had happened to Bert and quickly called the police. After receiving the report, the police immediately went to the boarding house to investigate. The landlady's story was still that he had gone on vacation. Another boarding house tenant, John, corroborated the landlady's statement. But unexpectedly, just as the officer was preparing to leave, John, who had just been so certain, secretly handed the police a small note. It read, "The landlady told me to lie. I actually don't know where Bert went either." It seemed this landlady was very suspicious. Upon investigation, it was discovered that the boarding house landlady was indeed not a simple person. The boarding house landlady was named Dorothea Puente, born in 1929 in Redlands, California. Her childhood was extremely tragic. Both parents were alcoholics. Her father died when she was 8, her mother when she was 9. Afterward, she was sent to an orphanage where she suffered various kinds of abuse. Perhaps this inhumane life made her emotionally cold. Lying about her age, at 16, Dorothea went to Olympia, Washington, to make a living. Here, she met a soldier just returned from the World War II battlefield, Fred McFall. It was love at first sight for both, and they quickly fell in love, smoothly entering into marriage. But shortly after the marriage, her husband discovered Dorothea was vain. Not only did she need material satisfaction, but also spiritual pursuits. She lied, claiming she experienced the Bataan Death March at 13. She said her father was a high-ranking diplomat This marriage lasted only 3 years. Their 2 daughters. One was left to be raised by McFall's parents. The other was given away. Shortly after the divorce, Dorothea was arrested and jailed for forging checks to shop at a department store. After her release, she went to San Francisco in 1952. The 23-year-old Dorothea lied that her name was Taina al-Hala, claiming to be a Muslim of Egyptian and Israeli descent. Using this fabricated identity, she married a sailor, Axel Johansson. Because her husband was often away at sea, the lonely Dorothea secretly used her husband's money, bringing different men home every night for flings. Later, she simply opened a brothel and started a business. However, the business didn't last long. The place was reported and shut down. Dorothea was sentenced to 90 days in jail. Later on, her husband, unable to tolerate Dorothea's alcoholism, gambling, infidelity, baseless tantrums, constant lying, and criminal behavior, had her committed to a mental hospital. After diagnosis, doctors believed Dorothea was a pathological liar with an unstable personality. The two separated because of this. Not long after, this 14-year marriage finally ended. After the divorce, to make a living, Dorothea found a job as a nurse's aide, specializing in caring for the disabled and elderly. Because of this, she learned some nursing knowledge. In 1966, having just ended her second marriage, Dorothea transformed into a devout and kind Christian. Ms. Sharon. She used her home as a base, specializing in providing free shelter services for abused young women. This move not only concealed her unsightly past, but also earned her respect in the community. This seemed to be her discovery of a get-rich-quick scheme. 2 years later, the 39-year-old Dorothea married a young man 19 years her junior, Roberto Puente. However, this marriage lasted only 16 months, ultimately ending due to incompatibility. At the same time, the shelter she operated also closed down due to debt. After this divorce, Dorothea acted unusually, disguising herself to look like an old woman in her 50s or 60s. She leveraged the good reputation and connections she had built in the community to acquire a 3-story, 16-room boarding house in Sacramento, specifically taking in alcoholics, drug users, the homeless, and elderly people with mental illness. The elderly only needed to pay a very low fee to enjoy food, lodging, and care at the boarding house. Such a good deed was recognized by many social workers, making her a local charity celebrity for a time. But as the saying goes, unwarranted diligence hides treacherous intentions. No one gets up early without profit. There must be a reason for greed. Dorothea did all this just to make dirty money. In the boarding house, many elderly people, due to physical or mental reasons, were unable to manage their own finances. Dorothea, naturally, became the payee for their social welfare benefits. Every time she received the money, she would keep most of it under the guise of room and board fees, only transferring the small remaining amount to the elderly. For the elderly who were capable of self-care, she would open every letter addressed to them, intercepting their pension and social security checks. Then she would forge their signatures and withdraw the money from the bank. Not only that, government grants and donations from the public would all go into her pocket. After several years of operation, she saved up a lot of money. She then donated the plundered money to charity, donating money and goods to nursing homes and schools, receiving wave after wave of praise. In 1976, the 47-year-old Dorothea married a 52-year-old tenant, Pedro Montalvo. But just 1 week later, this marriage ended with Pedro's sudden departure. The devastated Dorothea sought solace in bars. Compared to the tenderness of young men, she preferred older, mature men, especially those already receiving retirement pensions. Once she locked onto a target, she would play her 3 trump cards: stylish, empathetic, and exceptionally caring, to gain her praised trust. This way, she could easily drug the elderly, steal their jewelry, credit cards, and benefit checks, and forge their signatures to cash them. This not only provided spiritual comfort, but also financial satisfaction. 2 years later, Dorothea was charged with forging signatures and fraudulently collecting 34 social welfare checks. She was sentenced by the court to 5 years of probation and ordered to pay $4,000 in restitution. One of the conditions of her probation was that she could not operate a boarding house. Therefore, Dorothea, having some nursing experience during her probation, found a job as a private caregiver for the elderly. In 1982, Dorothea was charged with robbery for drugging people and stealing their property, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, due to her good behavior in prison, she was paroled after serving 3 years. One of the parole conditions was that she was not allowed to run a boarding house, care for the elderly, or assist others in handling government pensions. While serving time in prison, Dorothea became close pen pals with a 77-year-old man from Oregon, Everson Gilmuth. Upon learning of Dorothea's impending release, Everson, who was utterly infatuated, drove his Ford pickup truck to meet her. Before leaving, Everson excitedly told his family he was going to Sacramento, California, to meet his pen pal, and if all went well, he would be getting married soon. But after her release, Dorothea completely disregarded the parole agreement. She immediately acquired a 2-story boarding house and returned to her old business. This was the same one we mentioned earlier, the Victorian-style boarding house with the large garden. She ran this business for over 3 years. With her reputation for accepting everyone, she won the unanimous praise of social workers. Until this time, when social worker Judy noticed something was wrong and called the police, did her identity come to light. The police found the person who left the voicemail for social worker Judy. This person didn't know anyone named Bert at all. Dorothea had simply given him some money and asked him to make a phone call, as instructed. The tenant, John, who secretly passed the note to the officer, stated he had once heard strange noises at night, like something was being dragged from the 2nd floor to the 1st. Sometimes he also smelled a disgusting, strange odor from upstairs. Suspicious holes often appeared in the garden lawn. His intuition told him someone was buried in the holes. Neighbors near the boarding house reported to the police that Dorothea had previously hired an alcoholic, homeless man as a handyman. This man was known to everyone as Chief. Dorothea often had Chief dig holes, either in the basement or the backyard. Chief also frequently used a wheelbarrow to transport soil, garbage, and so on. After the garage in the backyard was demolished and a concrete slab was laid, Chief disappeared. Not only that, Dorothea's yard often emitted waves of foul odor. The surrounding neighbors didn't dare open their windows for ventilation, even on hot days. In response, Dorothea would either say the sewer was clogged, or that she was composting fertilizer with kitchen scraps, or that there were dead rats in the yard, and so on. Another social worker said he had placed several homeless individuals and people in need at Dorothea's boarding house, but when he went to visit these people, some of them had vanished without a trace. The landlady's explanation was that these people had left on their own accord. Considering that some people were indeed reluctant to live in boarding houses, this social worker didn't think much of it. But later, he heard rumors that people had mysteriously disappeared from this boarding house. After that, he never placed anyone there again. On November 11, 1988, 4 days had passed since social worker Judy reported to the police. Several police officers, armed with a search warrant, went to Dorothea's boarding house again and requested to dig up her garden. In response, the 59-year-old Dorothea was not only very cooperative, telling the police to dig wherever they wanted, but also, fearing the police didn't have enough tools, proactively offered her own shovel. In an area where the soil had been recently turned, they dug for a while and found some scraps of fabric and something resembling dried meat. Suddenly, one officer's shovel seemed to be blocked by a tree root. He bent down to pull at it with his hands. With a snap, the root in his hand broke. Looking closely, it was a human leg bone. Dorothea, standing to the side, expressed her horror, claiming she knew nothing about it. After clearing the surrounding soil, they discovered a human foot. The police set up a perimeter around the garden and stopped digging. They wanted to take Dorothea to the station for questioning, because there was no direct evidence linking the discovered remains to her, and coupled with her kind-looking face and her usual charitable activities, she had a good reputation in the community. So after taking her statement, the police released her. Early the next morning, the police arrived with a team of experts and an excavation crew. This excavation was startling. A total of 7 bodies were unearthed from the yard, both male and female, buried over a wide span of time. One set of remains was even incomplete, and Dorothea, the prime suspect in the case, had, just as the police excavation began, left the scene under the pretext of needing to buy a cup of coffee to calm her nerves. Because she was not yet a suspect at the time, she was allowed to go alone. As it turned out, once she left, she fled. 7 bodies. The suspect on the run. Once this news broke, major news media outlets scrambled to report it. The headlines were each more eye-catching than the last. Things like Dorothea's Garden of Bones, Landlady of the House of Death, and so on. Many media outlets also explicitly criticized the Sacramento police, as well as several public agencies that dealt with the boarding house, and private charitable organizations, believing they were guilty of negligence. For several years, no one had discovered that Dorothea was violating her parole conditions and still operating a boarding house. Let's get back to Dorothea. She used the opportunity of buying coffee to flee all the way to Los Angeles. She checked into a motel under an alias to lay low. She didn't dare go out for several days. Later, feeling extremely bored, she dressed up meticulously and went to a bar near the motel for a drink under cover of darkness. As a result, her old habits flared up. At the bar, she struck up a conversation with a man receiving a pension. While chatting, Dorothea figured out the man's financial situation. The two exchanged contact information and agreed to meet again the next day. After the man returned home, he kept feeling that this charming woman seemed familiar. As it happened, he just turned on the TV and saw the news about the manhunt for Dorothea. After calming down, he quickly called the police. Based on the tip, the police arrested Dorothea at the motel. After the case, details were exposed. Many people reported that the disappearances of people they knew were related to Dorothea. The police investigated each one, and indeed found 2 cases connected to Dorothea. The first was 53-year-old Ruth Monroe. Police speculated this case was likely Dorothea's first murder. Ruth was a tenant at the boarding house and died after staying for only about 10 days. At the time, Ruth's husband had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and she was very depressed. Dorothea said she was melancholic. Plus, the medical examiner later detected large amounts of codeine and acetaminophen in her system. Therefore, her death was officially ruled as suicide. The case was quickly closed. But Ruth's family and some friends had always been suspicious, because not long after Ruth died, Dorothea was sentenced to 5 years in prison for drugging her clients and an elderly person at a bar and stealing their property. But at the time, there was no evidence linking her to Ruth's death. Now, the police discovered that after Ruth's death, Dorothea had taken $6,000 from her. Another person who may have been poisoned by Dorothea was her 77-year-old pen pal from prison, Everson. In 1985, after Dorothea was released from prison, she and Everson fell madly in love. Everson, who had come to get married, joyfully handed over financial control of his household to Dorothea. But before he could be happy for long, he mysteriously disappeared. Dorothea told people around her that the two were incompatible and broke up. For 3 years, she had been collecting Everson's Social Security benefits, and even, in Everson's name, wrote letters to his family to assure them he was safe. Now, the police found that after Everson disappeared, Dorothea hired a handyman to custom build a 1.8 by 0.9 by 0.8 meter wooden box. The handyman said his payment was a Ford pickup truck. Dorothea sealed the wooden box and asked for it to be moved to a nearby warehouse. But strangely, before they even reached the warehouse, Dorothea suddenly said, "Forget it, don't deliver it. It's not anything useful anyway. Just dispose of it as trash." So they threw the wooden box by the side of a river. Based on this information, the police immediately made a connection to the unidentified male body found by the river in 1986. At that time, a fisherman, while fishing by the river, discovered a wooden box containing remains. According to the medical examiner, the deceased was an elderly male with no injuries due to severe decomposition. and no identifying items on the body. The deceased's identity was never determined. Now, hearing the handyman's account, the police identified the remains. Sure enough, it was the missing Everson. At this point in the investigation, the police found the victims had commonalities. They were elderly, homeless, had some sort of ailment, had no family or were estranged from them, and importantly, had Social Security benefits. The disappearance of these people usually wouldn't arouse suspicion. She eliminated them by drugging them, then forged the victims' signatures to continue collecting their Social Security benefits. According to local media reports, police found a piece of paper in the boarding house with the first initial of each victim's name and how much cash she had cashed. Dorothea was able to get her hands on $5,000 every month. She also spent lavishly, spending $87,000 over time on cosmetic surgery. The results showed that the 7 remains found in the boarding house were all tenants of Dorothea. One of them was indeed Bert, who had been missing for days. The oldest among them was 78. The youngest 51. Large amounts of flurazepam were detected in the victims' bodies. The drug levels far exceeded a normal person's dosage. The drug can be used as an anti-anxiety, sedative, and muscle relaxant, but it cannot be taken with alcohol or other hypnotic substances. Abuse can lead to addiction or even death. While imprisoned, Dorothea stated to the outside world that she only pleaded guilty to forging signatures and benefit fraud. As for murder and burying bodies, she claimed it had nothing to do with her. She had been a good person.
What did they have? They had their little Social Security check. And they had their life. That's all they had. They didn't have cars. They didn't have houses. They didn't have a lot of clothes. They didn't have anything. She took their checks away from them, and then she took their lives away from them.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Dorothea Puente, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
That the defendant is to be imprisoned in the state prison for a term of life without possibility of parole.
After the trial, she was incarcerated at the Central California Women's Facility. While serving her sentence, Dorothea even published a cookbook titled Cooking with a Serial Killer. On March 27, 2011, 82-year-old Dorothea died in prison. Until her death, she maintained her innocence. As for the house where the 7 bodies were found, in 2011, it was auctioned off to a couple for $215,000. After renovation, it took on a whole new look. In 2013, the house was included in the Sacramento Old City Home Tour event list organized by the Shoe Closet and was opened to the public with ticket prices of $25 for presale and $30 on the day. Actually, in life, incidents like Dorothea's, fake charity, real fraud, are not uncommon. We still hope everyone will be more vigilant and beware of pseudo-charity, alright? That's all for today's story. Please give us a triple combo, like, share, subscribe, to show your support. A simple click of your finger is great encouragement for me. I'm DarkCaseX. See you next time.